with Captain Wes Pulver, and he's got an exciting project going on down there in New London. Tell us about the museum, the progress, and what's going on.
No, thanks, John, so much for the opportunity to be with you today. And yeah, real excited about building the first and only National Coast Guard Museum for our nation. The Coast Guard was established in its predecessor services in 1790. And here we are just a few years later putting together a world-class museum on the New London, Connecticut waterfront for our Coast Guard, for our nation, for our maritime history. Real excited to be here today.
Tell me about the progress.
Actually, the project itself was envisioned years back, but we started hiring staff in the mid 2015, 2016 timeframe. The last 5 to 6 years, we've raised 142 of the 150 million that we need to get the project done. So we've made some incredible progress. We started construction this last summer, initially for a bulkhead and fill, or really a site preparation to make sure that we can build that perfect museum on the perfect site along the Thames River. So we've started construction. I've got a few phases to go, but we're starting to put steel in the ground, and it will be built here in just a few years.
Now, for those who are unfamiliar with the significance of New London, tell us why New London, Connecticut.
Well, New London is one of the original 10, Coast Guard sites. Alexander Hamilton, back in 1790, envisioned 10 cutters around the country to enforce enforcement for tariffs and if necessary, save lives and all those things that need to be done on the maritime. One of the 10 cutters, the Argus, was actually in New London, Connecticut from 1791. It was the longest serving of the 10 revenue marine cutters. And so it's a historic port. And then within New London now, it has a Coast Guard station. It's got the Research and Development Center for the Coast Guard. We've got the Coast Guard Academy, as well as the Leadership Development Center here for our service. So we're excited that not only is it a historic port for New London, but it's a vibrant port for the Coast Guard. So it's a nice port. Congress actually said it would be in New London, Connecticut, and we built it here, and we're thrilled to have it here.
It's going to be a spectacular facility. We've seen the renders. Tell me what most excites you about it.
Well, what's real exciting is to tell the Coast Guard story. So the building itself, which with the part we're responsible for, it's going to be extraordinary. 80,000+ square foot building. It's got a 5-story atrium that has within it one of our H-60 Jayhawk helicopters and rescue swimmer on the tether lines. There on the hoist line, there to save lives. So it's going to be incredible. It's 5 decks or 5 floors, of
5 decks.
telling exhibit.
Coming from Wes, it's 5 decks, right?
To me, it's 5 decks with bulkheads and overheads. That's correct. I served a lot of ships over the years, but thrilled to have 5 floors that we can tell the Coast Guard story. But what excites me most, I think it's going to be just from my perspective, telling the story, and then 2, watching people come to that waterfront with within this huge atrium is a beautiful helicopter doing a rescue, that iconic image of the service on the waterfront. The Coast Guard Bark Eagle, America's tall ship, is actually going to be home ported right there adjacent. A vibrant New London waterfront. It's a Coast Guard city. We can't wait to have folks come and take a great look at what their Coast Guard has done for them over the last 232 years.
So the Bark Eagle will be stationed there?
That's correct. There's a home port, or the home port of the Bark Eagle will be right there adjacent at the city pier. New London, the city of New London has been incredibly gracious having this museum here, and including donating part of the land and allowing Eagle to home port itself at their city pier. But yeah, the home port of the Eagle will be there, and she deploys for basically 5 months a year. So during those 5 months, other Coast Guard cutters will come into that mooring. We just can't wait to show the American public what the Coast Guard does for them every day.
Now, Wes, you've got a little bit of history with the Bark Eagle, don't you?
I might have served on her for a few summers as a cadet at the academy, and then on active duty. I've spent actually 10 summers, but 5 years of my career, in effect, have been on the Bark Eagle as both second in command and commanding officer. So it was a great privilege for me, and and she's about to deploy here actually this weekend and heading over to Europe for the summer. And I'm not on her, but I'm jealous, but I'm there in spirit.
Tell me a little bit more about the Bark Eagle. It's an amazing ship. Tell me what the mission of the Eagle is.
Well, the mission is the primary mission is to train the future officers of the Coast Guard. The officer candidates that come through at the Leadership Development Center here in New London, as well as the cadets at the Coast Guard Academy, they get their really nautical large vessel training on a ship that was designed to train young mariners. I'd like to tell people that it's the greatest ropes course in the world. You still climb and in storms and all the rest, and take in and taking sail is necessary, and you sail the vessel. A lot of labor, a lot of hard work on that vessel, and you learn what it is to be tired and wet and working hard alongside other people and relying on other people. So it's a great training vessel, and the Coast Guard puts their officers through that. I'll call it the gauntlet. As well as it represents our country, both within the United States, but abroad as well. So example, this summer, it'll go through the Baltic nations, and interesting timing with some of the changes with NATO that America's tall ship with a beautiful national ensign, American flag flying off its stern is going to be in some of those countries that are joining NATO. It's really a spectacular opportunity for the country to show the flag and show our support around the world.
It certainly is. It certainly is. And we've all been around tall ships, and you can't miss the Eagle when it comes in, that's for sure. It's quite the moment. It's seeing all the Coast Guard's people on the deck of that beauty as she pulls in. It's a moment, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's something underway as well. And for the mariners out there, the navigation gear goes off and they take out the sextants and they do it how it was done 300 years ago. Wow. It is an extraordinary learning platform, and it really ties you into the sea. And these young mariners, these young apprentices that will serve our country for hopefully, like I did, 30 years, that's where they learn those skill sets, and as well as at the academy and officer candidate. But being out on the water, like a lot of the folks that listen to this podcast are, how precious that time is to develop yourself, and the Coast Guard invests in those folks for hopefully a 30-year career.
So talk a little bit about funding for the museum. Where did the funding come from? Is this totally federally funded, or is it funded by folks who might choose to help out and lend a hand?
Well, it's funded by many folks who choose to help out, and we certainly appreciate their support. And if anyone out there gets the motivation to be part of what we're doing, coastguardmuseum.org is our webpage, and please take a look. But so it's really a series of different folks that have supported it. The city of New London provided the property. The state of Connecticut, it's right here at the train station. The state of Connecticut, quite visionary, thought that maybe it's an opportunity to fix a safety issue at the train station. There's no underpass or overpass at the New London train station, and they've invested into the public access to the site, including a bridge over the rail, which is going to make it safer down on the waterfront. They've been very supportive. The federal government is both supported construction towards the museum, as well as they've supported through the Coast Guard, not us, the actual exhibits and programming and running of the museum. Will be a free museum for the public because it is a federal museum. And so that's great support. And then ourselves, we committed $50 million to the project. As we put together our team, we've actually raised over 42.5 at this point. Got a little bit to go, but boy, we've got over that big hump, and we've got some just amazing donors and folks that are part of what we're doing here.
So free museum. This is much like any national museum. This will be free to the public.
That's correct. And for those who have lived around the D.C. area, like I did during my career, you know what it is to have the Smithsonian or the Marine Corps and the Army Museum, where you bring your family and they're invited in without a cost to it. That will be the same. The difference is it's now in New London, Connecticut. So a little outside that hub of free museums. Some visionary folks decided to put it in another region of the country. And here we are in the New England area, and we hope that everyone in New England, and really it's a national museum, we hope everyone across the country has a chance to see the story that the Coast Guard's had with our maritime nation. It's side by side since 1790. The success of our nation has been the success of our Coast Guard. And I'm biased, I admit it. I'm proud of my time in the service, but really proud to be doing what we're doing here today, which is building a museum for that service. And they can tell their story to a lot of folks who don't know what they do.
So you've seen the plans. Obviously, you're part of the build. What most excites you? Is there any display or exhibit that really struck you or is going to strike you?
It's interesting. I'm in the grind, right? So, but there's
Mm,
these 5 areas. So the Coast Guard has all these different missions, and the grouping of the missions I think is going to resonate with our country. Lifesavers around the globe is one missionary they're going to focus on,
mm,
and defenders of our nation, something that folks don't know that the Coast Guard's been in every conflict that the
right,
United States has had.
right.
They've been there, and folks have been there. You look at enforcers on the seas and the law enforcement, and talking about the illegal drugs coming across the Caribbean basin. The Coast Guard's been there and amazingly seizes more illegal narcotics, the Coast Guard on the water, than all law enforcement does in the United States combined once it gets to the states. So that's how much the Coast Guard's doing that mission. And then the missions people don't realize is like Champions of Commerce. They're going to have a whole wing area on how the Coast Guard impacts everything in our lives. 90% of
Mm.
what we have in front of us today in our rooms is been delivered over the water at some point, and it's been regulated by our service. So those are a lot of hardworking folks, and we're going to tell that story and let people understand that major impact the Coast Guard has in their ports and moving that commerce. And then lastly, protection of the environment, what the Coast Guard does when there's an oil spill, or what they do for, everyone thinks of the EPA, a great service, a great agency for our nation. Coast Guard does it over water. So the EPA and the Coast Guard have a great relationship, but when it's on water, Coast Guard takes lead, and people don't know that. I think when people see that and see how that's developed over the 232 years or 233 years now of Coast Guard service to our nation, I think they'll be really excited about those stories.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest misconceptions folks have about the Coast Guard is they just guard the coast, and that's
Yeah.
certainly not the case. Obviously.
Well, people don't realize that I tell people in the Coast Guard I visited 42 countries, and people look at me,
Mm.
what were you doing
Yeah,
there? And
right.
so I've
Yeah.
I've been in the Black Sea on a major cutter, and because of after the fall of the Soviet Union, we were, it was a national security objective to go out and talk to those nations about what type of maritime they want to have. And a lot of small countries don't need a missile navy, but they need to protect their shores, their fisheries, their resources. That's a Coast Guard mission. So we were asked to go over there and spend time, there. I've been in the Caribbean basin, stopping the drugs. My career of my 28 years, it was 28 total years of active duty. Half that time was on ships, and I went around the world. It wasn't, I only had one patrol boat that worked off the Carolina coast. The rest of the vessels I was on, we went overseas, or we were certainly outside the littoral waters of our country.
Here we are. You would think this isn't the new Coast Guard Museum. This isn't a new version of a Coast Guard museum. This is the first Coast Guard museum.
It is the first national. There's a few beautiful
Right.
regional museums. One in the
Hmm.
Pacific Northwest, very regionally focused, not large, actually done by volunteers. There's one in Barnstable up on Cape Cod. Lots of life-saving stations, which again, predecessor service of the Coast Guard.
Hmm.
So there's some smaller, but there wasn't that one spot where the Coast Guard could have that platform to have that place to tell their story. I attribute on two things. One, the Coast Guard doesn't like to tell their story. There's a whole lot of folks
Mm.
that just want to go out and work the mission. They don't have this
Yeah,
focus on telling their story
humble
to other
folk.
people. They just work hard.
Right.
The second
Serving
one is, and
humbly.
I'm convinced on this, is because it's a service that is not per se underfunded, but it's not the highest funded
Okay.
agency. When you're balancing between fuel for ships and
Mm.
we can buy a museum, and they're gonna operate. And so it took a nonprofit, which I'm now part of, the National Coast Guard Museum Association, to take lead on the raising of the revenue and really doing the work, because Coast Guard men and women don't focus on things like museums. They focus on saving lives and enforcing the law and protecting our environment. So real proud of those folks, and we're proud that, like, for me in retirement, but our team is mostly non-retirees. It's just a team of folks that have specialties to help us get there. We're all proud to be working on this project, and we're working on it so the Coast Guard doesn't have to. So they get their story told through a nonprofit, vice putting their own resources and time into it at the level that we've had to.
Yeah, that's humble folks tend to be that way, right? It's not about the museums. And it's not about telling their stories. It's about their actions, which we're honored to have those folks
Yeah,
serving with the
it's
Coast
funny.
Guard.
When I served, I didn't think much on it, but now I'm so happy that we can provide the Coast Guard this platform. Our nation needs to know what the service does for them, and it's important. And again, it's not just the Coast Guard history; it's a maritime history of our nation that'll be shown. I think it's important people realize of what the Coast Guard does, how it supports it, and also allows the Coast Guard, tell that story to the community, internationally, let folks see what we're doing. And a great compliment to the Coast Guard is how many Coast Guards are out there, and in different nations with the Coast Guard, with our Coast Guard stripe on their boats. So the more we tell that story and how it is to save lives and protect the environment, all that is as a national mission, it's good for our world, not just our nation. That's a good story to tell.
So big plans for the ribbon cutting ceremony. I'm sure for you,
We're
it can't come soon enough, right?
Well, we've been grinding, and now we're thrilled. On behalf of our whole board, our chair Sue Curtin, our entire team, we're just thrilled to get to the point that we can see the ribbon cutting in the future. We did what's called a keel laying ceremony as we started our construction last summer, and we really enjoyed that. But the commissioning ceremony, when we commissioned this Coast Guard asset, 2 to 3 years from now, we've got some work to finish up. We've got some fundraising to do. We've got we've got a few hurdles to get through, but we're real excited about that finish line. And then when it's open, as noted, we sort of put ourselves out of business a little bit. We build a building, we turn it to the service, and the federal government run this as a free museum. And so what we'll do is we'll provide support, but we kind of go from lead on this construction project to the Coast Guard itself, taking lead on telling their story. And they've already started bringing people in to tell that story. So we're real excited about the folks that they're choosing to bring up to New Line in Connecticut. And hopefully everyone that hears this broadcast or sees this podcast can come join us and take a look at what the Coast Guard's done and really come to a great area that most people don't know about, New Line in Connecticut and the southeastern Connecticut region with Mystic, and it's just a really neat area for the maritime, and love to have people come and visit.
Yeah, it is a beautiful area. Wes, we at the Drift will be there along for the ride with you. We'll continue.
I know you will be, John.
And it was a pleasure having you on board with us. Thank you, sir, for your service and for your extended service as you build this. Take a role in building this wonderful museum. Well deserved. Museum.
Now, thank you, John. And thanks for taking the time with us today as well. We'd love to get the story out there. And similar to the Coast Guard, our noses to the grindstone, we're working hard. And sometimes we lose opportunities where we're not telling our story as well. But we're excited about what we're doing. On a personal note, I was very proud to serve in the Coast Guard and serve our nation for 28 years. And I'm really proud to be serving on this project. And I can speak for our whole team. We're just excited to bring it to the finish line. Folks like you out there, John, helping us out, get that word out. We can't say thank you enough. So to you and your viewership and listenership and all the rest, we say thank you.
Captain Wes Pulver of the National Coast Guard Museum, thanks again.
Thank you, John.
The Drift podcast can be found at driftsociably.com or where all fine podcasts are heard.